We are constantly told that an AI powered future is inevitable, that it will revolutionize every industry, it'll create unprecedented efficiency, and it'll change life as we know it. But what if that's only one possible version of the future? What if, instead of a dramatic takeover, AI just fades into the background? What if it becomes like the microwave oven? It's an appliance that's born from Einstein's world changing physics that we now use to reheat coffee without a second thought. Well, this is the kind of thinking that separates reactive organizations from future ready ones. It's about trading the illusion of certainty for the resilience of preparation. And today, we have the perfect guide to help us navigate these alternative realities. My guest today is Daniel Rasmus, who is the founder and principal analyst at Serious Insights. And he's a renowned futurist and a scenario planner who has shaped thought leadership at giants like Microsoft and Forrester. And he's the author of several books on AI and the future of work. And he teaches scenario planning at the University of Washington. He doesn't just predict the future, he helps organizations prepare for multiple futures. Daniel, welcome to the Digital Impact.
Thank you very much, Charles. Look forward to our conversation.
I'm really excited for this one because it's so different from a lot of the other conversations that we've had in the past. I want to go ahead and just start with the big idea, right?
Sure.
When most leaders start talking about the future of AI, it's often like this straight line prediction towards a very singular outcome. But
Right.
you champion a very different approach called scenario planning. So, can you break down what exactly that is?
Sure. Scenario planning is not new. It comes from about the same time as the origins of artificial intelligence back in the 1950s, when we were trying to understand the implications of nuclear weapons. Right. So some people equate AI to nuclear weapons and think about them as the next weapon of mass destruction. And so it's probably apt that the kinds of thinking that played into nuclear weapons discussions are relevant to AI as well. The basic premise is that there are big drivers in the world that are shaping it, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I lean into the uncertainty because I think even big drivers can, as much as they're overwhelming things like demographics or big economic changes or political shifts, I think are all founded with a large degree of uncertainty about where they go. And as we've seen in just the last year or so, how quickly things can shift based on those foundations becoming real, right? Things that we said we could not imagine happening happen. And they were uncertain until they became certain. And as soon as they became certain, they created new uncertainties, right? Just if we talk about something as in top of mind as tariffs, there was a lot of uncertainty about were there going to be tariffs? And now that there are tariffs, there's a lot of uncertainty about what are the implications of the tariffs, right? And so the uncertainty continues forward. Organizations that do not accept uncertainty and try to plan around and believe in certain things, I think are at much higher risk than those that I always tell them to put a name on uncertainty. And that's the starting point. The foundation, as well, is narratives about the future. So, in a typical scenario planning environment, you will list a lot of uncertainties, you will understand them, you will document them, you'll have discussions about them, which ones are the most critical and most uncertain to a question that you're trying to answer, like what is the future of work? And then you write stories about those futures, and then you play your strategy, your roadmaps, your ideas through those in what I call wind tunneling, right? So it's very similar to something that you might put an automobile through and see how the particles are flowing over the surface of a vehicle. We do that with ideas. How does this idea flow when that particular set of assertions about the future, if we assume they're true, then we end up with ways of testing our ideas.
Now, do you see a lot of like really common pitfalls or blind spots with organizations when they really rely too heavily on these linear forecasting models? I mean, businesses really, really like certainty.
Yeah.
They're always going to try to bet on what they consider to be a sure thing. And we know that never really pans out the way that they expect.
Yeah, well, that is the risk, right? Is that they are so certain about it that they have created all of the blind spots, and the uncertainties are the blind spots, right? They've completely ignored them, and then they go, "Oh my God, what that could never imagine that that would happen." Right? I mean, if you look at I find it fascinating when we think about COVID that Microsoft and Cisco and Zoom and others for years said, you don't need offices. You should work remotely. Look at all these great collaboration tools we've put together, right? They were actually saying that when I was at Microsoft. We were saying things about the distributed work and people don't have to come to the office all the time. We actually had thought leadership around that. And then when COVID happened, people went, "Oh my God, people have to not come to the office anymore." Well, there were already tools, which of course is why those companies took off during, right? Because I sat on innumerable briefing calls with every collaboration company during COVID about the amount of investment they were making to make the remote work experience great. And then they failed to imagine that COVID would end. And so then I don't have any briefings now with collaboration companies for the most part that aren't related to AI. They're not related to remote work or distance work or how to, it's all about embedding AI into collaboration. Because that's the next thing, right? And so all of that stuff, it was like it never happened. Billions of dollars of investments, right? You go back to COVID and you look at the companies that were acquired by Cisco and Microsoft and others, and it's crazy. And then now it's like it never happened, right? It's okay. Now everybody, including those companies, want people to go back to the office, right? Even though a few years ago they were touting that we don't need to have people in the office. It's okay to work remotely. So, yeah, so that's the risk. You need to constantly pay attention. That is one of the number one things I repeat it over and over is you need to pay attention to the world around you and understand what the uncertainties are and where those risks can manifest themselves for your business.
I'm personally a huge fan of remote work, and I personally hope that that never truly goes away. But then again, my wife's been working remotely for 20 something years. So,
Yeah.
long before COVID. So I have to imagine it's going to be around for quite some time to come.
It is, but it's not the marketing platform that it was during COVID, right? I mean, and so yes, and the reality is yes, you're right. It's absolutely hybrid work, remote work is continuing, but the market message now, of course, is and AI has kind of usurped that as well, right? We're no longer hearing about people forcing people back to work. We're now hearing about people being forced to use AI. So, it's
That's the
the
narrative right now, right?
the narrative changes, right?
Earlier, when I made my comment about a microwave oven, I'm going to admit I absolutely stole that from you because we had talked about that earlier. Yeah, so this is all about how a technology that's rooted in this really profound science just kind of becomes this very mundane kitchen appliance.
Yeah.
You had suggested that AI is pretty much going to follow that similar path. And I want to know more about that.
Well, as a scenario planner, one of the paths that AI could follow is that we could get bored with it, right? It could just become so embedded. I have a feature called reorientation that I have had characterized as the meh AI future, right? Where it's there, it's used in everything, and people aren't, it has in some ways maybe profoundly changed the way that we do it, but we don't care about those profound changes because they're in the past now, right? It's kind of done what it's going to do. It's automated a bunch of stuff. It's made the world more efficient, but it never became the kind of planet altering version that it could be, right? Or and maybe it's because, and when we look at the uncertainties, it's because of factors that have almost nothing to do with the technology, right? They could be political factors that put restraints on it. It could be social factors where people just said, there are movements that pushed against it. It could be social movements that just were boredom, right? We're starting to see just this week, I saw some articles in CIO and elsewhere that we're talking about, people getting to the point of kind of the AI burden is getting pushback, right? And they're going, okay, I have other things to do besides worry about AI, but you're telling me that's all I need to worry about. And so what does that mean for the company and the job and our future of work within individual organizations, right? Our healthcare organizations, manufacturing organizations, et cetera. Are they AI companies now? Are we still thinking about manufacturing, or, is AI the thing we should be worrying about, right? And so do we start migrating back to, core fundamentals rather than, the latest tech?
Now, it's interesting when you said that we tend to get bored with new things, and you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, I think back to simple things like the cell phone,
Yeah.
this little device in my hand that sends a signal to outer space and then back down again to anywhere on the planet
Right.
in less than a second. And we'll get frustrated when it has to buffer, or if I'm not getting a clean signal, and oh, this piece of junk. And we forget about how truly fascinating this technology is. And if AI goes down that route, I mean, do you think that just our tendency to so quickly normalize incredible technology, I mean, is this going to be like one of the key reasons why we tend to fail to see any of these alternative futures?
Yes, that is one of the factors. But going to the cell phone, right? I mean, I used to write for iPhone Life magazine. I used to go down to the stores on the day that the new iPhone came out, and I would interview people in line about what features there used to be lines in front of AT&T and T-Mobile and elsewhere, right? To stand there and wait for the new iPhone. There's no lines anymore, right? And yeah, people may do some pre-orders and other stuff online, but that sense of hype that we had about the great new iPhone, and it's one of the reasons Wall Street looks at Apple and goes, oh, there's no lines anymore. There's no lines for Samsung either, right? There's no lines for anything, right? Because the cell phone, as you said, is just kind of an appliance at this point, and because there's no lines for the new Hamilton blender to make better margaritas either, right? But to your point about microwaves and Einstein, it's also interesting. We think we also forget that there are complex calculations that manage the time dilation between the satellites and Earth, and there's actually calculations that use Einsteinian physics to because the satellites are aging at a faster rate than we are because they're farther from the gravity. So it's you know signals travel relativistically, and so yeah, there's science is important regardless of what you know, and that's one of the other futures, of course, is autocratic futures where you're told what to think, and AI plays a very different role in those than it would in the mad world, right?
I want to talk about what people are doing now with AI, and because we do this with pretty much every technology, right? Somebody comes out with something that's revolutionary and just breaks barriers, and then you have just this slew of copycats that are going to try to jump on that hype train as it's going by with whatever thing they can think of. And AI is certainly no exception to that. I think we've seen like a toothbrush and a lamp,
I
and
use an
I mean,
AI
just
toothbrush every
really.
day. Yeah.
I have an electric razor that Bluetooths to my phone, and it uses AI to map my face, and I have no
Yeah.
idea what I would ever use that for.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm curious, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between genuinely useful innovation and just absolute marketing
I,
gimmick?
I don't think there's a line because we don't know, right? That's one of those uncertainties, right? That breakthrough thing, right? What was the PC for, right? If we go back to PCs originally, a lot of people thought of them as word processors. It wasn't, didn't really know that you knew you kind of. It's good to have one because, gee, isn't it kind of cool to have my own computer? And people used to lug around their Osborne computers that look like suitcases and were heavier than a suitcase, and because it was cool to have a computer until you went, oh, spreadsheets, wow, I could do numbers on this thing, right? And then you had desktop publishing, you had other things that singular examples of, and desktop publishing didn't come out as it is today in full formed and blown. And, it was pretty simple and it was black and white, right? It was on, a lot of it was on a, 9-inch Macintosh screen. People went, oh, look, desktop publishing, WYSIWYG, we can do, and then it took off, right? I mean, nobody would even think of a world now where we didn't have things that were drag and drop tools that allowed us to, I mean, look at Canva. That's their entire market is doing that, right? That made the PC something other than what the manufacturers thought about it as, right? One of the slides that I show in my classes and in my lectures is one about technologies that the inventors of the technologies kind of went, oh no, we're not sure, right? So Ken Olsen, the head of digital equipment at the time, said, I don't know why anybody wants a PC in their house, right? He was the biggest computer company at the time. Uh, Edison said, I don't know if there's any financial value to a phonograph, right? And so, even the inventors don't imagine what people can do with the technologies. And so I think it's good on one hand that people take these things and put them into everything. It does lean into the eventually overwhelming slash potentially boredom of the it's everywhere, right? I can't turn my back without seeing something that's got AI in it, and you start then filtering out. And I think that's a biological thing versus, biological from the standpoint of our brains are made to say, if there's so much of something, I have to block it out, right? Because if we actually saw everything, if we were walking down a street and we actually saw everything that we could see, we would be immobile, right? We would be unable to walk because but our brains have evolved to filter out a lot of stuff so we aren't overwhelmed by our environment and we're able to
We
walk
are,
and talk and
we are
right.
hit, according, I remember one study that says we are hit with approximately 9,000 advertisements per day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's and
But you wouldn't
yeah.
know that because we filter so much of it out. It just becomes
Exactly,
background noise.
exactly. And I was actually thinking of just nature, right? If you walk out into a forest,
Oh, sure.
look at all the things that you could be looking at that you're not because your brain is evolved, and so that's one of the factors I think we have to think about. But I think also it's good from the standpoint of we don't know which one of those things is going to be the thing that hits, right? I will also say that one of the issues that I'm seeing, if we're talking about contemporary use of AI, is the trust factor of I'm not sure which AI I'm talking to and which one I should trust, right? So I, for instance, have worked with ChatGPT. I have trained it to think to some degree like me. I've given it examples. I've updated its memory. I've done all kinds of things to make it a useful tool for me, right? If I go to another tool that's calling out to Gemini, Gemini doesn't know anything about me, right? I mean, it may, but that instance of it probably doesn't. And so it's a different experience, and I might get a different answer from putting the same query into ChatGPT than I would get from a call out to Gemini inside of a Google document, right? And so again, I think I think people are just going, there's a lot of this, right? and I'm not sure what to trust. I'm not sure it all kinds of works differently. Every user interface to it, and it's how do I invoke it? What's it actually passing? We don't know what the parameters are. There's a lot of questions for people, and I think
my
a lot
my
of
wife recently had to shift from one AI platform to another, and she did equate it to like leaving a significant other and then going dating again. She's like, oh, this
yeah,
thing
yeah,
now it has to get to know me all over again, and I have to tell it all about me and all about my
right.
favorite things. And
Right. And on a more mundane level, people stress from going, oh, my company just abandoned Microsoft Office and went to Google Docs, right? I don't, the sheets and presentations, it's all different now, right? I have to relearn how to create presentations and write documents, right? And yeah, that they're seeing. And even, we just had, GPT-5 come out yesterday. And I've already noticed it's talking to me differently. It's not my old GPT-4. It's now GPT-5. And so when I write something, it's going, that's a different response than I got yesterday, right? And so even models within an ecosystem, when they update, you can see changes in how you interact with them and how they respond. And of course, that's part of the the upgrade cycle, right?
And I also have to imagine that when we start talking about some of these other inventions, like very specifically the AI toothbrush and the AI face razor, this is not the same AI that we were talking about when we get into the predictive models and all that. These are very different AI
Yeah,
systems.
I would actually say the predictive models, yes, because my toothbrush, for instance, as you said to it maps my mouth and it shows me where I haven't brushed well enough, which is not a bad thing, right?
Sure.
And so that's analytical, right? It's pattern recognition. It's looking at here's the strokes that I did and how long I spent someplace, and it gives me a visual image of there's either red or yellow, and most of the time I don't have either of those, but there's sometimes a yellow spot of you missed an area down here. On the flip side, we were talking about, so there's a light behind me. That's an AI lamp. I can actually do generative AI and say, make it look like the Northern Lights, and it'll come up with something that is, and so that is generative AI. And I look at AI as there's a big gap between the kind of what I think of as autonomic AI, which is the brain functions that we have that keep us breathing and allow us to hear things without thinking about it and all that kind of stuff. And those are, I think, getting very sophisticated on hardware, right? So AI cameras, AI audio, right? So that if you walk away from your computer, it goes into security mode. When you're doing camera work, it's actually using AI to adjust the scene. It's doing AI based pattern recognition for noise reduction. That's all to me non-reasoning, non-generative. It's machine learning, and they've taught, and I think they're doing very well with that. But that, again, to the boredom point, is we don't really care about that. That's not exciting AI. Nobody's doing billions of dollars of acquisitions for a company that's giving you better noise suppression on your microphone on your computer. They're not doing that, right? They're doing billions of dollars of I can automate business processes using agents, right? That those companies are being acquired, not the companies that are doing the autonomic stuff at this point, right?
When we take a look at all of the innovations in the past and we kind of compare it to what's happening now, I'm really curious, what are some of these like historical pitfalls and the historical misunderstandings? And we've seen companies make these mistakes before with other technology, and now they're rushing into AI, and you can see the patterns happening. They're about to
Yeah.
repeat, or maybe they have already repeated the same mistakes and pitfalls that they did before. What are some of the ones that you've seen?
Well, it's hard to blame the companies for making the mistakes, right? Because when you have a new technology, there is nothing known about how to do it well, right? And this is something I tell people that are asking about well, how do we do AI well? I've even proposed that we get rid of the idea of like IT maturity models, because it's ridiculous at this point, right? There's no way to say that at some point my compute environment is stable and mature, because it's constantly being disrupted and therefore can never be stable and mature. Um, and so I think the big mistake that they make is, again, not paying attention, not figuring out how to align their business strategy to the solution. So it's not as much about should I be in the space and should I dabble purposefully or not, right? And so those that don't think about it in a purposeful way, I think, are at risk, as well as those that ignore it, right? So that this is just a fad. It's probably not a fad, even if it goes into one of the four different futures that I have. It's not a fad. It will have an implication of some sort in whatever future we have. And so, again, paying attention and seeing what's happening and what that means to your business, right? Constantly coming back to what business are we in? How does AI play a role in that? So I've done a lot of work, for instance, in looking at capabilities across banking and healthcare and others, and helping companies say, within a capability, where is AI useful today? Where are there use cases with real vendors and real solutions with real ROI playing into those spaces? Where are there places where people are saying it should be, but there's no evidence at this point? And of course, evidence is a little sketchy right now, because if you're successful, some large companies may not share what they're doing, right? Um,
Right.
and then you have these are places where it's not ready yet, but you might be the first one, right? And so is that an area where you're willing to make that risk, where it looks like it's a good use case, but nobody's really solved it yet, right? Because there's still AI is as amazing as it is to have a chat bot that you can have a conversation with. There's a lot of last mile stuff that AI is not doing yet. That's still cobbled together and piecemealed, and the companies that do that, you know, may have to redo it again as it gets more mature. But they could become, the first solvers of an area and have significant competitive advantage. But they have to be able to take that risk as well. So I think those are the areas that I have companies looking at right now.
Now, coming from a document company, I have to ask this question, and I really am curious about this.
Yeah,
When we're talking about like document workflows, and we're talking about managing your contracts, invoices, data, all of that stuff,
yeah.
I'm really curious how scenario planning helps a company make better decisions today about adopting a tool like that, like document intelligence, AI powered e
Right.
signatures, and stuff like that, so that you're not getting locked into a system that becomes obsolete in an unexpected future.
Yeah, well, there's always a risk that something's going to be obsolete. Well, let me put it this way: everything's going to be obsolete, right? So there's no not obsolete, right? That goes right up against the maturity thing, right? The question is your partner going to evolve in the way that makes sense to your business, right? So, working with vendors in order to have the conversation with them about where are your roadmaps, how do those roadmaps align with what I think is going to happen? So, just looking at multiple futures is the starting point. Again, paying attention and seeing which direction things are going, which uncertainties are starting to become known, and then what new uncertainties are unfolding. Having that conversation with yourself and then mapping that against here's where my vendors are going. And if you see a vendor that's not going in the right direction, it's worthy of a conversation both internally and with them. Because one of the things I saw when I was doing this at Microsoft was that both the partners, the partner ecosystem, and the customer base were very appreciative of having a high level perspective where Microsoft had made an investment in thinking about the future that they could share with others, right? And so any company that does this kind of work, to me, should share it with their partners and their customers and others to have that conversation. And then I think, just looking at how that business evolves. If you're a document centric, workflow oriented organization, what does that mean in light of things like agents, right? So if we break down all of our capabilities and we're saying here's what we do today, where is AI applying itself within the workflows successfully today at an accuracy in provenance and everything else that we know that it's trusted, right, to do the kind of work that we're doing, and where isn't it, and could it in the future do some of those other areas. I think that's where companies need to I don't think companies spend enough time understanding themselves as it is. And then when you have a new technology come in, you go, what is our capability map, right? I mean, I did this years ago at Hughes Aircraft. We did a whole enterprise architecture and spent it was like 18 months interviewing people to document what we didn't. Nobody walked up and said, "Oh, here's the capability map for this function, and here just you have it." Right? They didn't have it. We had to create it, right? And then you had to decide you were going to invest in keeping it up to date, right? Once you created it. So that's an ongoing piece of the business that organizations often miss, which I think hampers them when something like AI comes on board and they start going, oh yeah, so we should just go do this, but where does it work for us, right? And a lot of companies, I mean, I spend all the time, a lot of time looking at case studies for companies to tell them what other companies are doing because they don't have anybody internally doing that already.
I want to have a little bit of fun now as we're starting to
Yeah.
get close to the end. You are a regular speaker at Comic Cons. I am a regular attendee at Comic Cons. I have a lot of fun there. But when you're there, you're often exploring the link between science fiction and real world technology. And so I'm really curious how kind of this plays into how we imagine AI in pop culture, how that's influencing the kinds of products that we're putting together today, the kind of products that enterprises are even putting together today.
Yeah. Well,
Because
the enterprise is the
I
right.
obviously I want Jarvis in my house someday eventually, and I
Yeah.
keep imagining we're going to get there pretty soon.
Well, you said enterprise, and that's the right inspiration, I think, is that many of the people, and if you look at what they actually do, and I'll use Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk as hero examples of this, right? Why do rockets land vertically now? Because in science fiction, rockets landed vertically. And they said, I think we can do that. Like the ones that were on the cover of the science fiction pulps that we read as kids, rockets landed vertically, right? Same thing of the, Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock could have a conversation with a computer on the Enterprise, right? I know for a fact that the iPad, because Steve Jobs was inspired by the pad on Star Trek The Next Generation, created something that looked like the pad, right? And so a lot of the visionary stuff from science fiction, I think, is very much influenced where people are going. Not that it wasn't in the conversation before, right? If rockets take off vertically, why can't they land vertically? Because that's a hard problem to solve, right? It's a lot easier to just fall into the ocean and put out some balloons, right? That's a simpler engineering solution, right? Which is why we don't see all the rockets that try to land vertically actually successfully do that. Um, and it's also costs more energy to do that, right? But I think there is down deep in the hearts of these entrepreneurs is the stuff they saw as kids and them wanting to make that right. And so I think there's a lot of influence that's taking place. I mean, the Alexa is clearly it was clearly a first version of the Jeff Bezos let me talk to my house, right? And we're now seeing Gen AI making that even more of a reality. So yeah, I think there's a lot of influence. And now the question is going back of the what's the influence on the experiences? This is where science fiction is going to go, right? Now that we actually have some of this stuff, now what are the experiences? We've already seen it, with Black Mirror and social media. We've, of course, AI and robots have always been a theme, but now people have personal experience with them, not just imaginative experience. So a, we're going to see science fiction, literature, and television and movies and other things influenced by people's real world experience. Joys, disappointments, fears, all that stuff is going to play into the how the future of it evolves.
Before we go, I have a couple of rapid fire questions and I'm going to throw your way. It's just five
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
They're kind of like fill in the blank. So just like whatever comes to the top of mind first when I read this off, just
Okay.
let it all out. All
Okay.
right. Most companies are way too certain about AI's ability to.
I think it's to provide meaningful ROI across the board at this point, right? I think they're searching for solutions that it's going to take more time than they want.
Scenario planning is a compass. It is not a.
It is not a predictor of the future. It's a forecast, multiple forecasts. It predicts nothing, but it helps you have deep and meaningful conversations that you should be having.
The most underrated technology that quietly changed the world is.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think the cell phones, but not that's not underrated. Running water, water and sewage, I think is the underrated technology that we're not
You know
paying
what? I'm
enough
going to go
attention
with you
to
right
right now.
there. Indoor
Yeah,
plumbing.
indoor
That kind of
plumbing.
changed a lot, and no one ever really talks about that anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Even the Romans had it, and then they lost them. We forgot how to do it for a while.
In 5 years, I really hope we're using AI for this, but I worry that it's probably actually going to be used for this.
So the future we didn't talk about is the optimistic one. I hope it's being used to talk about big questions, right? So we've got so much data about the world. And I hope we continue to collect that information because the pattern recognition capabilities of AI are going to become even more astounding than they are today. And so asking big questions about talking about fresh water, right? What should we do to optimize access to fresh water in the world, right? It may not come up with a politically expedient answer, but it may come up with one that makes human life survivable, right? And so asking those big questions. And I hope we don't use it for political purposes and make it say the things that we think it should say rather than using data to actually inform what the truth of reality is.
And then finally, the most fascinating technology that was truly influenced by pop culture that you've ever reviewed or received recently was.
I live on an iPad. I literally, I mean, to the point that people go, well, you didn't answer my text. I'm going, well, I don't have WhatsApp on my iPad. I don't use my phone as much. I live on my iPad. I sketch, I read, I draw, I do all kinds of things. And so that has been hugely influential of having compute and connectivity with me everywhere in a form factor that allows me to do stuff. I think this phone's a little small, and an iPad is just right, as Little Red Riding Hood would say,
Where did we
or
first see that, the
Goldilocks.
iPad? I mean, I
Where did we
definitely
first?
feel like I've seen it in a lot of science fiction
Well,
movies and
the
shows before it
pad,
became
this
real.
yeah, TNG, the pad was and I mean, Captain Kirk had a very bulky one in TOS where he had it was much thicker. But I think, from my understanding, Steve Jobs was very influenced by the next generation of Star Trek and the pad, the PADD, that was used on that show. And just a personal computing device that was multifunctional and had an accessible user interface that allowed people to do things. And let's go build one of those. And we did, and they did.
They did indeed.
They did.
Daniel, thanks again. This was an absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
Same here. Thank you.
To everybody else that's listening, if you want to dive deeper into Daniel's work on scenario planning and the future of technology, you can find him at his website, which is seriousinsight.net. And we'll have links to the website and all of his social media. All is going to be in the description of this episode. So make sure you check that out. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And you can find the video version of this on YouTube or the audio version of this, which is available on all your favorite podcast players, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your support really means a lot to us, and we appreciate having you here. Until next time, I've been your host, Charles, and thank you for listening.